Helen. I am indeed the U.S. coordinator for the 100 Million campaign. We have 3 bases. We are based in New Delhi and London and here in Washington, D.C., where I am right now. And I just want to tell you, first of all, a little bit about the 100 Million campaign in general before I launch into kind of more of our detailed stuff. So the 100 Million campaign is essentially a call to action for young activists all over the world to ensure that every child is free, safe, and educated. The name actually originates because we want 100 million young people who are able to speak out, who have that privilege and ability to do so, to speak out for the 100 million most marginalized children in the world. So we support young people all over the world. We do have those 3 main headquarters, but we have what we kind of call national campaign groups. So groups of young people who are leading the charge in their country for the 100 Million campaign all over. We have them in Kenya, in Ghana, Brazil, Belgium, almost anywhere you name it. We've got somebody kind of working for our campaign and working for young people in their country. So we stand up and we demand the rights for the 100 million most marginalized children and young people. For us here in the US, that actually typically means people up to the age of 25. After that, we don't really consider them youth activists, but rather youth supporters. By mobilizing to end violence against these children, eradicating child labor, ensuring education, safety, access to healthcare, access to water and sanitation, we're hoping to break the cycles of illiteracy, poverty, and violence so that every young person in the world has the chance to fulfill their own potential. So this campaign, the 100 Million campaign, is actually housed under the Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation. We have the Children's Foundation globally, and we actually have one here specifically in the US. It's founded by Kailash Satyarthi and youth activists all over the world. We've grown to about 30 countries now. We're looking at growth to about 50 this year. And this is just within the first 2 years after the Global March in India when we launched. So the one thing that I really want to share with you guys, it's called the Justice for Every Child campaign. It's really new to us. It's new to the US. I'm going to share my screen in a little bit just to show you what we have action-wise. But before I do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So our Justice for Every Child campaign is actually started a couple months ago just because of the pandemic we have going on right now. There are 20% of the most marginalized children in the world. They're suffering the most. That's 1 in 5 children, essentially. They're suffering the most due to the inequalities that have been exposed by this pandemic. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to briefly show you an action pack for you to look at and then walk through kind of the things that you can do. So this is our US specific action pack for Justice for Every Child. I'm not going to read every single word to you, but just kind of give you a brief rundown. So as I said, COVID-19 has kind of exposed a lot of inequalities for children in this pandemic, whether it has to do with access to food, access to housing, access to education. We're seeing a lot here in the US. And the big question is kind of nearly 1 in 5 children live on less than $2 a day. How would you do that during a pandemic? How would we do this when you're in informal settlements or you don't have access to education, access to a safe space, access to food? So this is what we're focusing on. Globally, what we're focusing on is communities that really need help. We've published a few things on Mathare, Kenya, specifically refugee children who are unaccompanied and they don't have an adult who's taking care of them, who's helping them find the things they need. Here in the US, we're actually launching this campaign, giving us a US specific launch with policy asks that are domestic on August 12th. So keep tuned in for us if you want to join that campaign here in the US. So the global call is we want world leaders all over to dedicate $1 trillion, equivalent to about 20% of the global response funding, to meet that 20% of children and give them what they need during this pandemic. So we have, as you can see on the left, we have kind of asks for richer countries, more developed countries. So that would be us here in the US. Ask them to support families with these 20% of children. Ask and make sure that companies, businesses, are the private sector essentially is dedicating funds to make sure that people are safe and healthy. And we are also asking that more developed countries not only focus on education domestically, but they actually dedicate funding to make sure that there's education in other countries that maybe don't have that right now or don't have a system set up to help children during that time. What we're calling this also, when you do your act, we're saying hands up for the 1 in 5. We're also calling it thumbs up, whichever you prefer. Essentially, what we do, if you look at the bottom right, you'll see a handprint, and the thumb is red. So this is supposed to represent 20%, the 1 in 5 most marginalized children, and that you are standing up for them. So we have actually a couple steps here that I'm going to walk through with you. So the first step is actually to sign and share the petition, which I'm going to show you in a minute after I go through the rest of these steps, show you kind of the Justice for Every Child website before. The petition on the website, which is essentially to ask these world leaders to go ahead and dedicate that $1 trillion. So when you sign, that's what you're asking people to do. You're asking us to adhere to the asks in the Justice for Every Child campaign. This document, it is online, and I'll show you where. Step 2, creating your image, creating your thumb image, totally up to you, whatever you want. And you can keep your face in the image or not. It's totally fine if you just want it of your hand, if you just want your face in hand, whatever you're comfortable with. So step 3 is sharing your image. So 100 million, as I'll let you know, we are on basically every social media platform. We do have a US specific Twitter account. So if you're on Twitter, go and follow us. It's just me tweeting out things and talking to people. And it's a really great space to kind of talk to others about your activism, or if you need help, or if you want to join in our campaigns, tweet out your thumb, tweet out your hand, and use hashtag Justice for Every Child. That you can also go in and look at the hashtag. We've got people posting this all over the world, so it's really great to go ahead and look in that. In the bottom left, which you'll see, that's in Kenya. On the right, that's our team in London, and on the top, that's in Ghana. So for everyone to post their hands and ask for, you know, that $1 trillion to stand up for every 1 in 5 children, that's our goal, is to have everybody putting this out there. So if you've created a photo, as we can do later, go ahead and post that on social media, including whichever demands you also think. A big question, we do have marginalized children here in the US, and what would this look like for them? What about children working in the field? What about children who don't have that access to education? What could this look like to US children? And our 4th step, we have a template letter here, writing a letter to your decision maker. This could be your member of Congress, it could be your senator, it could be the mayor of your town, whatever you think. Whatever you think that someone could make that change, we want you to write this letter to them. That's why we call them decision makers. That's something that we kind of focus on a lot, given that we are a global campaign and there isn't always 1 or 2 people who can make that change. So this goes out to anyone who has that power. Down at the bottom, I have included links for you to find your senator or find your Congress member if you're not sure. This doesn't have to be physically sent out. This can be sent in an email. You can read it as a script on a phone. You can post an image of it on any social media. You can tag your decision maker. We've used this just as a basic template. You can also take parts of this if you want, change it up. If you just want to use tiny bits of it, totally fine. And as I would like you all to go ahead and look at the 3rd paragraph we have in here. It's something that we focused on a lot before COVID-19 happened. It's just something we're now pushing out more. So in the US, there are an estimated 300,000 to 400,000 children working in agriculture at all times. These children are a marginalized group. They can be as young as 12 working in US fields. So you have to be 21. You used to have to be 18, but now you have to be 21 to buy tobacco. And we actually have children working on tobacco fields that are as young as 12 that are being exposed to this nicotine and unhealthy pesticides and everything else in the fields. And that's a group that we've been working with a lot to try and make these areas safer for them, or declare tobacco fields as hazardous work. So we're including that in our US domestic asks as well. This is just a walk down of like how much things cost to kind of give you an idea of why we're asking what we're asking for. I think it's a really interesting thing to look at. So if you actually look at the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically on water and sanitation, I believe that's number 7. This is critical for COVID-19, for example, and it would cost $228 billion to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal. I won't read all these numbers out to you, but it is a really interesting look at what we're asking for and why it's this amount. I also have an email down at the bottom if you're interested to look at. I have my personal email as well, but you can always email USA at 100 million and talk to me or one of our national campaign members. They're usually on that email as well. So this is our main website. It's just 100million.org. And this is what it looks like. And if you go to Act Now, you'll see Justice for Every Child. I'm going to go ahead and click on that so you can see it. So here we have the petition, our hands up, social action, and just general information. This pack I just showed you, it is on this website. However, it's not US focused. If you are interested in the US focused pack and all of our other information, so we're actually at Satyarthi-US because we're under the Kailash Satyarthi US Children's Foundation here. And if you go to our work and people, I'll just show you, we have our own 100 million page just for the US. So I'm just going to point out a couple of things here for you. I do send out a newsletter every single month. It includes activism in the US that's been going on. It has important information, new action packs. So if you want to sign up for that, it's that first button on the right. It's just once a month. We don't use your email for anything else. We also have a blog that's done by our youth activists. We've had bits done by people participating in the Black Lives Matter movement in Minneapolis. We've had bits on trafficking recently. So, but we have our regular 100 million campaign pledge linked here. That's just taking the pledge to make sure every child is free, safe, and educated. And then our other focuses are child trafficking in the US, which is a new action pack for us. And we're actually posting a lot about that on Twitter recently. World Day Against Trafficking in Persons was on the 30th. We have How to Write an Op-Ed. It's a toolkit that we have to just walk you through that process. If you do want to write an op-ed, we have examples in there, anything that you would need. Same thing with advocacy. This is probably our most useful toolkit. I would highly recommend that you go look at this. It's just a walkthrough of like, how can you start your own grassroots advocacy work? So anything you need is typically in there. And then our last is our focus on child labor and US tobacco, which I just mentioned a little bit ago. And this is just a lot of facts and people that we're working with and different stories. So that is all there for you, Satyarthi-US, and then the general global campaign. Sorry if that's confusing. But I would love to actually go ahead and really like to just show you this advocacy toolkit. I think it's probably the best bit of work that we've done for a while, just because it really does pertain to everybody. And I think it's the best skill building that we have, and I hope you all use it to go ahead and continue your work. So let me just share my screen real quick and show you what this does look like. It's called our Policy and Advocacy Toolkit. I won't walk through every single bit of it, I promise. I'm not going to just read to you. This is just a general definition of advocacy and what this means. So if you're not familiar, here, let me enter. So if you're not familiar with the process of the US government, which I'm going to safely assume you all are, this is here to kind of show you what that looks like and why, if you're trying to make legislative change, it can take a while. This is a great bit of advice that I always like to read to everybody, but they do say an expert was once a beginner, and that holds true when it comes to advocacy. So there's no doubt that as a young person, when you start now, you'll become an expert on the issue in no time. And just a small note on this, I think that, because I used to actually work on the Hill myself here in the Capitol, and a lot of people do get discredited because they're young and they say you don't know anything, and it's not true. Anyone can be a lobbyist. Anyone can go ask for legislative change. And if you know what you're talking about, they tend to listen. So if you want to call yourself an expert because you've done your research and you've been doing your activism work, good, do, because you are. So just kind of asking what your goal is.
Right? Sorry, is this on the website?
Yes, so this is on the KSCF website. So if you go to KSCF-US, that's where all of the 100 million US work is, and that's where this is. My email's in the chat, so if you want it and you just can't find it and you're like, Helen, can you just send me all of your documents? I will send you all of our documents. This is actually on the left an image of an activity we did at American University last year. We do still have the banner, it's very fun. So this is what we call our advocacy role map. So these are questions that you're going to have to ask yourself if you do want to start a new advocacy campaign and work towards change in the US. So what do we want to accomplish? Once you figure out what you want to accomplish, you have to ask yourself who can make it happen. Then ask yourself, sorry, oh, it moved, sorry. Then you ask yourself, what do they have that can make this happen? And after that, it's kind of combined, what do you need? So what do they have / what are they missing? Ask yourself, what do I have? What am I missing? And these things could be like a base of support. They could be legislative introduced into the chambers, whichever it is. Once you've figured all this out, ask yourself, how can you take action? Is it letter writing? Is it protesting? Is it lobbying? Whichever it is, and then evaluating your advocacy efforts. That's something that we do in everything, which is always evaluate both your success and your failure. What did you have that was great that you should definitely do last time? Did you not have maybe enough support, enough volunteers? Build that base. This is just kind of a breakdown of all that. I won't read it to you, but it is really good information if you're interested. And just pointing out different forms of advocacy, especially now, given that everything maybe is different, especially if you're used to physically being out and advocating for change. So emailing, writing letters to your decision makers, calling them up. My suggestion would be, if this is something that you're interested in, either writing letters or calling is probably best. Those letters have to be opened if they are sent to congressional offices, so someone will always read your letter. And then calling works a lot better too, because someone's going to answer and they have to talk to you. Emails can sometimes disappear. So definitely focus on those two if you're interested. And our personal favorite of the 100 Million campaign now is using social media to connect with your decision makers. Everyone is incredibly active on social media now, and it's a really great opportunity to use your platform to advocate for change. Not something we can really do right now, but meeting with your decision maker or planning an activity like a lobby day, or maybe you're at school and you want to do kind of letter writing, set up a table. Once we are back in person, the pandemic will end. These are definitely activities that are great, and 100 Million can actually help out with. One of the main things that we're here for is really to support you in the activities that you want to do. And here we have an example email just to fill in the blanks on anything that you're working towards, as well as an example phone script. And these are a bit of tips I just do want to read out loud because I think they're very helpful. So preparing your call by writing down your main tips is really, really helpful. We have a link here to find your representative's phone number. Let them know if you're a constituent. Elected officials are always interested in the opinions of their constituents. Even if you're not old enough to vote yet, you probably will be soon, and it's still important to them. And make sure you use your personal experience to go ahead and add in that kind of emotional impact with somebody. And this is just a general checklist. So that's all I really wanted to show you, just to show you the tools that we do have for you guys. And the main tool really is me. My main job is really just to help and talk to people about what change they're doing, what I can help with, give access to our materials. And then we do have our own, obviously, separate campaigns, but really that's for you guys to kind of take and launch further. We're just here to push it out and push it out and push out stories from people who maybe typically wouldn't have that voice to give materials out to others who didn't have the opportunity to get them before. So child labor obviously has been a very large focus globally, and it's been hard to push that out in the US, given that it's not something that we see. It's really not. These issues typically stem from already marginalized groups, which is why we focus so hard on children and agriculture. And it stems from also legislation. So if you look at the Fair Labor Standards Act, it says that you have to be 16, and even then only part-time work. However, there is an exception for agricultural work. It includes everything. It's outdoor agricultural working except for mining, because that's hazardous. And any child as young as 12, says the law, unless you're somehow related to somebody who's running the farm. We've seen 8-year-olds that are working on fields all day. And the only rule is that as long as they don't have to be in school at that exact time, they can work as much as wanted or needed. So this is something that you just don't really see, and it's a really big problem in the U.S. A couple other things that we've worked on before, specifically child marriage in the U.S. There are only 2 states that have explicitly outlawed child marriage, and that's a real big issue that we've been starting work with a different NGO that works on that. So yeah, those are 2 really big issues that we focused on. Mostly child labor in agriculture is the biggest US issue. And to go even further into that, so if you look at kind of what's happening on the US-Mexico border, you see all the children that are there. So child trafficking is rampant, and it's happening all over. It's something that we've recently just put a bunch of stuff out on. So there is something called the Trafficking in Persons Report, put out every year by the U.S. State Department. The 2020 Trafficking in Persons Report was just released a couple of weeks ago. And it actually said that not only has the U.S. seen an uptick in child trafficking, but half of child trafficking cases had to do with sex crimes. And while we've had an uptick, we've gone down in prosecution, we've gone down in immigration benefits given to trafficking victims, and we've gone down in identification of trafficking victims, which then allows them access to rehabilitation and therapy sessions as well. Because I can tell you for child labor, you're looking at your agricultural heavy states. So top 5, Virginia, Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and South Carolina, or North Carolina, sorry. Those are your top 5 states for child labor, simply because they're so agricultural heavy.
I actually have another question. I know that part of one of your toolkits was this getting rich countries to donate about like $1 trillion to help these marginalized children all over the world. And I was wondering that there's also this like ethical question that emerges about the fact that like COVID-19 is a worldwide problem, and marginalized children are also affected by it in the United States. So rather than using this money to help countries, isn't there also a moral obligation to use that money for that country in the United States? So I wanted to hear your response to that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we do launch Justice for Every Child, because that's the campaign that kind of hosts that idea on the 12th, you'll see a lot more on this. So you guys actually get a sneak peek into what we're going to be focusing on specifically. So these large global asks are kind of a world effort. So it's not necessarily the US needs to give X amount of money to X country for this many children. It is a global effort to find $1 trillion to go, okay, 20% of these children need this money. They need water, sanitation, food, access to education. If that education is virtual, they're going to need some sort of system to set that up. For the US specifically, so our policy asks are going to be very education focused as well, actually. So we're going to be talking about a couple things: safe and supportive environments in which to learn. We're going to talk about closing the distance learning gap. One big problem is not every child obviously has access to Wi-Fi or a laptop, and we're moving a lot of education online. And another stem of this is a lot of children actually use free lunches as their main meal of the day when it comes to schools and school systems. So we're going to be talking about addressing hunger and just how do we continue these programs if schools aren't actually in session. The only international focus that we're going to be really pushing here in the US is just providing 2 years of an external funding gap to achieve good quality universal education from pre-primary to secondary education in all low and lower middle income countries. So that's the only real international focus for the money specifically. And this is going to kind of look like, just so you get an idea, our activities are going to look like open letters to chair and ranking minority members of congressional committees, mostly Ways and Means, Appropriations, and Health and Human Services. We're going to have a few webinars. We're really pushing out the thumb message, and then getting kind of our partners that work in education. So like the National Educators Association, they're going to be working with us to really push out these asks, not only for the children, but to go ahead and say that anybody who's interested or works in education, this is what we're asking, and we're asking you to stand with us.
Any way you can tell us a little bit more about products that use child labor as their main labor system or a huge part of their labor system?
Specific to the US, really the problem is outsourcing. For example, I will go ahead and throw out there. So I'm sure you've all had at some point Nutella in your life, or Ferrero, the little chocolate things that have hazelnut stuff inside them. So that's a massive product, both in the US and in the EU. And just recently, our campaign was finding out and is working with others to fix this, that they actually don't have any checks in place to see where their hazelnuts come from. And fun fact for you all, and by fun, I mean not fun at all, Nutella is actually sourced from hazelnut farms that use almost solely child labor. It's a massive problem with lots of different industries, not just clothes and shoes, but food as well. Another problem is palm oil industries. It's the same problem. There are checks in place, but not for a middleman. So essentially, a larger company, say Nike, they will go, hey, you're supplying us. What does your labor look like? Who is working for this? And it's all the people who are transporting, but they don't go to the source. So when you look at harvesting like basic resources, you're looking at a lot of child labor, because technically the US doesn't check your source. They just check where the middleman is that's bringing that into the country. And individuals, we do screenings of the film. So if you do go and watch The Price of Free and you decide you want everybody else in the world to see it, which would be great, we actually do have, I personally have, you can email me for them, discussion guides and kind of walkthroughs of the film. So that's something that we've done. We have someone doing a walkathon, raising money to actually give out groceries and masks to people in their community up in New York right now. So basically anything that you can think of, there's probably a way that we can help you, whether that be if you need supplies that we need to ship to you, or if you just need some help coordinating it, if you need social media posts, or if you just need a voice, we're there for that. Also, kind of on an individual level, if you are interested in just getting involved in general, and you maybe don't really have like a campaign or any advocacy that you're doing right now, we do have opportunities to write blogs for us. If you want to write an op-ed, we can help you get that published. If you're interested in just volunteering in general and kind of talking to me every couple of weeks, we do have our national campaign group that sometimes is looking for new members, if that's something that you would be interested in. So if you do want to know about that, please email me. I put it in the chat, but it's also just Helen, Helen, at 100million.org. So that's pretty easy.
To conclude, and thank you, Helen, for such an amazing, informative presentation, and for all of you for taking the time to actually learn and take action on a Saturday morning. And I really hope that you really learned something about the 100 Million campaign, or how to get involved, or the issue of child labor itself. And what I guess we can try to do is try to get all these resources combined in an email so that it's easier for you to take action and get access to these information. And I hope you guys stay tuned for our next workshop on www.takeactioninc.com and our social media, take_action_inc. And also please follow 100 Million Campaign on Instagram or social media and sign their pledges. And so in the meantime, keep on learning, leading, and taking action, and I will see you next time.